The year is 2025. Tensions between the United States and Mexico have reached a boiling point. The issue? The seemingly unstoppable power of Mexican drug cartels. For years, these criminal organizations have fueled violence, corruption, and instability. Their reach extends deep into the United States, flooding its streets with narcotics. Now imagine a scenario where the U.S. takes unprecedented action, a full-scale military intervention against the cartels on Mexican soil. This essay explores the potentially devastating aftermath of such a decision. We will delve into the immediate military objectives and the fierce response from the Mexican government. Furthermore, we will analyze the ensuing diplomatic crisis, the surge of nationalism in Mexico, and the divided public opinion on both sides of the border. The economic ramifications, including disrupted trade and fluctuating drug prices, will also be examined. Finally, we will confront the grim reality of humanitarian suffering, civilian casualties, mass displacement, and a breeding ground for further violence. The purpose of this essay is not to glorify war or to simplify a complex issue. It is a warning, a glimpse into a future we must strive to avoid. The potential consequences of a U.S. military intervention in Mexico are too dire to ignore. This hypothetical scenario, though fictional, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the drug war, sovereignty, and the use of military force. It is a stark reminder that every bullet fired, every bomb dropped, has repercussions that extend far beyond the battlefield. The operation begins swiftly and decisively. U.S. fighter jets streak across the Mexican sky, targeting suspected cartel strongholds. Ground troops, heavily armed and equipped with advanced technology, pour across the border. Their mission to dismantle the cartels, capture their leaders, and seize their assets. The initial targets are strategic drug labs, weapons caches, and communication hubs. The U.S. military employs overwhelming force, aiming to cripple the cartel's infrastructure and sow chaos within their ranks. Drones, satellites, and sophisticated surveillance systems provide real-time intelligence, guiding the U.S. military's every move. Special forces units trained for surgical strikes and hostage rescues are deployed to capture high-value targets. The element of surprise is crucial. The U.S. hopes to decapitate the cartel's leadership before they can mount an organized resistance. However, the cartels are not caught completely off guard. Years of operating in a volatile environment have made them resilient and adaptable. They possess a vast network of informants, corrupt officials, and heavily armed foot soldiers. While the initial U.S. assault throws them into disarray, it also ignites a firestorm of violence and retaliation that will engulf the region for years to come. The U.S. military intervention, initially intended to be a swift and decisive blow against the cartels, inadvertently unleashes a chain reaction of unintended consequences. The cartels, though weakened, are far from defeated. They melt into the shadows, regroup, and prepare for a protracted and bloody conflict. The U.S. has poked the hornet's nest, and now it must face the full fury of the swarm. The reaction from Mexico City is immediate and furious. The Mexican government, caught off guard by the U.S. military incursion, denounces the operation as a blatant violation of its sovereignty. President Claudia Sheinbaum, in a fiery address to the nation, condemns the U.S. actions as an act of aggression and vows to defend Mexico's territorial integrity. The Mexican people, outraged by the U.S. intervention, take to the streets in massive protests. From the bustling metropolis of Mexico City to small towns along the U.S. border, a wave of anti-American sentiment sweeps the nation. Mexican flags are flown upside down, a traditional sign of distress. Protesters burn U.S. flags and effigies of the U.S. president. The Mexican military, despite being outmatched technologically by the U.S. forces, is placed on high alert. While a direct confrontation with the U.S. military is deemed unwinnable, the Mexican government makes it clear that it will not tolerate a foreign military presence on its soil. Mexican troops are deployed to border regions, and the government begins providing arms and logistical support to civilian militias who have taken up arms against the U.S. forces. The U.S. military intervention has backfired spectacularly on the diplomatic front. Relations between the U.S. and Mexico, already strained by years of disagreements over immigration, trade, and the drug war, plummet to an all-time low. The U.S., once seen as a partner, is now viewed by many in Mexico as an invading force. Section 4. Diplomatic fallout. The U.S. and Mexico at odds. The U.S. military operation in Mexico triggers a diplomatic earthquake. The United Nations Security Council convenes for an emergency session, with Mexico demanding international condemnation of the U.S. actions. The U.S., isolated and facing accusations of violating international law, struggles to justify its unilateral intervention. Allies of both the U.S. and Mexico find themselves caught in the crossfire. Canada and the European Union, while expressing concerns about the escalating violence in Mexico, condemn the U.S. military incursion as counterproductive and destabilizing. Russia and China, eager to exploit a wedge between the U.S. and its southern neighbor, offer rhetorical support to Mexico and condemn U.S. imperialism. The U.S. ambassador to Mexico is recalled to Washington for consultations, while the Mexican ambassador to the U.S. is withdrawn from Washington in protest. Diplomatic channels, once bustling with activity, fall silent. The U.S. and Mexico, once close partners in trade, security, and cultural exchange, are now locked in a bitter standoff. The diplomatic fallout from the U.S. military intervention extends far beyond the Western Hemisphere. The U.S.'s standing in the international community is tarnished, its commitment to diplomacy and multilateralism called into question. The world watches with bated breath, uncertain whether the U.S. and Mexico can avert a full-blown crisis. Nationalism surges on both sides of the border. In the U.S., a wave of patriotic fervor sweeps the nation, with citizens rallying in support of their troops and government. In Mexico, public fury reaches a boiling point, as citizens take to the streets in massive protests, decrying the U.S. intervention as an affront to their sovereignty. Social media becomes a battleground of opinions, with hashtags and viral videos fueling the fire of public sentiment. Political leaders in both countries find themselves under immense pressure to stand firm and not back down, further complicating diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis. The economic repercussions of the conflict are swift and severe. Trade between the U.S. and Mexico grinds to a halt, with tariffs and sanctions imposed by both sides. Businesses on both sides of the border suffer, with supply chains disrupted and markets thrown into disarray. The global economy feels the shockwaves as investors grow wary of the instability in North America. Other nations, sensing an opportunity, begin to realign their trade partnerships, seeking to capitalize on the shifting markets. The once thriving economic relationship between the U.S. and Mexico now hangs in the balance, with no clear path to recovery in sight. The true cost of the intervention becomes painfully clear as reports of casualties and displacement emerge. Families are torn apart with loved ones lost or missing. Refugee camps swell with those fleeing the violence, seeking safety and stability. Humanitarian organizations struggle to provide aid, as the sheer scale of the crisis overwhelms their resources. The stories of individual suffering and resilience begin to surface, painting a poignant picture of the human toll of conflict. The international community calls for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian assistance, but the path to peace remains fraught with challenges and uncertainty.